Hello everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my Game Week 36 transfer plans video, and I'm pretty pleased to announce that I've hit a sort of lifetime achievement in FPL. To take a minus 16 and to somehow hopefully come out with the green arrow. Seems like we're able to do it this week, and it's all thanks to Guardiola really, and Bukayo Saka too. We're of course at one point close to a North London derby clean sheet, although I have to say, watching that game, there was no chance really that Arsenal, I would say, deserved the clean sheet, even though of course the first goal was given away really by a complete error from David Raya. So look, the reality is we got very, very lucky this game week, and what I liked about the hits that I made is that it sets me up really nicely for Game Week 37, right? So the hits that I made, if I sort of just remind myself and quickly have a look at my team here with the auto sub points from Haaland as well due to the miracle Foden illness that just came out of nowhere. However, I ultimately took hits for Foden, for example. He should double in Gaming 37. Gordon as well. Son was technically my free transfer. Vicario was a hit. Now, it's not looking so good, but what did I say? I said that Neto, it seemed very unlikely that he was going to play in the game versus Brighton, and I was pretty confident about that because I just think that he hasn't played necessarily well for the season. Areola has also mentioned, that he would test out, Travers, or at least, consider dropping Neto. The fact that he did last week, the fact that it didn't really go wrong at all, leads me just to think that Neto's spot in the team is very, very insecure. So that's why I went for the hit to Vicario. And obviously, look, 1 point versus Arsenal. This is probably what I expect, 1 point, 2 points, something like that. The best game, of course, is versus Chelsea, because you'd hope, obviously, Chelsea less clinical, I suppose. Maybe a little bit more shots compared to Arsenal, who actually didn't take many shots, right? It actually just overwhelmingly suggested, I think, the game that Tottenham played very well, and Arsenal actually had very limited chances. Now, two great set pieces, and of course, Tottenham this season have proved to be a very, very poor set piece defending team. I don't have specific statistics to hand, but I think a friend of mine, 11ify on Twitter, has shown where Tottenham rank as a set piece defending team, and they're literally, a bottom quadrant team, so very, very poor, and that's something to look at for sure. But Vicario is someone who's going to double ultimately in Gaming 37 and has a good fixture in Gaming 38, so that's why we kept him in the team. And of course, he'll just be a part of the bench boost, no matter what in Gaming 37. I've got Fleck in here as well, who actually has a good fixture. Gordon and Isak, of course. I went Isak last week, so no Mateta, of course, and that was awful. But Isak, not having to spend a free transfer there was nice. A hit for Gordon was something that I wanted to do just because I wasn't really confident in Liverpool at all. I wouldn't say that I expected a Salah benching. I actually made my transfers before the Salah benching, but a lot of people were able to sort of make use of the Salah benching news to actually make the similar hits that I did, right? And I think that's totally fine. I just thought ultimately trying to calculate, for example, Game Week 37, thinking about the future and the bench boost and the value of, let's say, Salah with diminished minutes, given how poorly he's been playing. That's why I made those moves. I'm pretty confident that why I did that. And of course, the Salah benching just is nicer. It gives even more justification to almost, get immediate reward in return from someone like Gordon here. Not so nice that we missed out on Foden, but I think City were actually very, very subpar versus Nottingham Forest. So actually, maybe Foden might not have, absolutely destroyed that game, if we're being honest. So a goal from Haaland feels quite fortunate, and I'm quite happy to get it. And that's it really for this game week, right? We are somehow on a green arrow, so 6,938 in the world after starting from something like 7,500 last week. Hopefully we can end on a high. I think my big differentials are Jackson and Vicario versus Porro and Petrovic. So in reality, look, because I think it's still a good game on value for Jackson, I'm hoping for something here. Solanke as well, who's the player that I took out for a hit. Didn't actually talk about Jackson yet so far, but Solanke was the player I went out. Solanke is Arsenal next week, so it's actually really nice to know that I've got Jackson. It probably just means that I get to play him versus West Ham as well, hopefully, considering that Chelsea have no further injuries on that front. And Gusto, we just need to monitor that situation. Keep in mind, of course, that Gusto was confirmed to maybe start in Game Week 36 versus West Ham. So for those of you who have kept Gusto, have kept the faith, it's very likely that he can play next week, which would be nice for you managers. Looking at my team for next week, though, if I quickly just show, how I plan to line the team up. Right now, I've got Anthony Gordon on the bench. I am uncertain about that. I don't think that Jackson deserves to be benched. I just think that West Ham are one of the worst defensive teams in the league. Burnley are up there for sure, but this is Newcastle away from home. And honestly, I don't think Newcastle away from a home versus, at home is a joke. When you look at, for example, statistics of Newcastle performing as a team home and away, it's actually insane to see that they have comfortably played as a bottom four team in the league away from home. And we have enough sample size to say that because effectively you've already played most of the games within the league season away. You've played most of the teams within the league, and showing that sort of level of results from Newcastle is not something that I particularly like. And then the question, I suppose, is, between Isak and Gordon, who would I go for? I'd probably go for Isak as the penalty taker of the team. It depends, I suppose, on also what you think about Callum Wilson's minutes, and maybe whether that has a knock-on impact on Isak, because I think that Gordon should still be close to basically an 85 to 90 minute player for the rest of the season. So that's another decision to make. And then the decision with Son is also a question of course, Liverpool are, quote unquote, going to be a tougher team to face than Burnley, right? So from Gordon's perspective, he's now on set pieces, and as long as Trippier remains out of the team, that's actually a huge benefit for Gordon. You could see one of the first assists that he got within last week's match was actually from a set piece, and he was pretty close to also getting additional things. On top of that, too, I suppose you have to say that Liverpool have just been on a downwards trajectory, particularly on defense, right? On offense, I think they've created chances. The clear issue with offense has been the finishing. Not just Darwin, of course, that we usually like to scoff at for being a poor finisher, but Luis Diaz and Salah have clearly missed a ton of great chances, and that's fine. But that is concerning. But I think overall, you've seen that Liverpool have given up a lot more chances to much weaker teams. So I think, for example, any recent game, for example, even going back to, let's say, the games before the Atalanta defeat, you could suggest that Liverpool have been giving away a lot of chances and a lot of goals. For example, conceding to Sheffield United at Anfield, a good example of that. And it's not just, due to whether Kelleher played or Alisson played, but just in general, where the trajectory of the team is going. A lot of people have played a lot of minutes. We've seen Kwanzaa play at times. We've seen Konate play at times. It hasn't really helped Liverpool out. So I do like the idea of playing Son here. We can obviously re-monitor the situation after the match versus Tottenham, and Chelsea gets played, and we can maybe reassess. But right now, this is how I plan to lead the line. Haaland back for 30 minutes in a really nice cameo versus Nottingham Forest where he got to score a goal. Makes me just want to go for a Haaland captaincy here. I think Palmer captaincy is more than valid as well, right? When we talk about these bottom tier defenses, ultimately West Ham is a bottom three, bottom four defense this season. And so I think Palmer is actually an extremely valid captaincy as well. And I think people will probably be deciding between that. I'm also really happy that I've got Foden and Saka. A lot of people will also consider them as captaincy options because with Bournemouth, I think probably not so much, but I think I know a lot of people are very confident in Arsenal. They look like a team that's completely up for it in the run-in. Obviously, the match versus Tottenham was probably a little bit of a step back, similar to the Aston Villa game, but they got the result, and that's huge. As far as Foden, of course, I can see a lot of people basically looking at Haaland as someone who, in some of the bigger games this season, unfortunately, has not really turned up, whereas Foden, of course, has been more than impressive, showing extremely insane finishing skill outside the box as well. So I can see that the captaincy is going to be a huge flip this week, in my opinion, if people are not so confident in a Haaland captaincy. So definitely, I think you can say Foden, Palmer, and Haaland are probably our leading captaincy options. And I think that's it, right? A lot of my team ultimately has a lot of good home fixtures. I've got Flecken versus Fulham at home. Fulham have shown to be once again a similar team to Newcastle in that they've been very good at home, much less effective away from home, and ultimately it's not like they're an extremely high scoring team. So I kind of like the idea of just playing Flecken here. Of course, I have an opportunity to go for a goalkeeper potentially, someone like Onana, but it's Onana versus Crystal Palace away, which I don't really like. I prefer to have my home fixtures, so I think Flecken's going to play here. The defense is very simple. Now, Gusto, of course, is on the bench, and arguably Gusto could be someone who's deserving to play versus West Ham if he gets to start and if he gets to play. But I think also coming back from an injury, it's very unlikely that Gusto's going to get the minutes I want. Guardiola's been incredible. City have actually been pretty resolute as of late, despite actually the Nottingham Forest game where they conceded a lot of chances. And of course, Arsenal, for the run-in, as I said, I think I'm very confident in owning Arsenal picks. So happy to have taken all the hits that were necessary to have a good team for the run-in. And in Game Week 37, of course, I still think the team looks quite good, but we can talk about Game Week 37 and Game Week 38 when we look at, for example, my planner on Fantasy Football Hub. So check the link in the description, of course, if you want to have a look at the sort of transfer planner that I'll be looking at later in the video. But that's pretty much it. In terms of Game Week 36, though, I don't think I have any move to make, really. I think this is a chance for me to ultimately roll my free transfer. I think I've got a really good first bench option in Gordon, so if anyone gets sick or is ill or anything happens, I've got a good auto sub. Hopefully with Gusto as well. That's the same case there. And even Pau Torres, looking at that, Aston Villa still have a lot to play for this season. So they've got a European spot that they want to claim 100%. The draw versus Chelsea is probably not the result they wanted, but given that Tottenham lost, that's obviously huge and a huge dent on Tottenham's Champions League hopes. But I can still see, of course, Aston Villa going full strength. Not to mention as well that Brighton, unfortunately, just look an absolutely awful team, right? When you look at the Brighton team sheet, unfortunately, with the amount of injuries that they've surfaced this season, unfortunately, they look like a championship side plus Pascal Gross plus João Pedro. That's sort of my opinion. And it is a bit of a dire spot, and I don't think it's the fault of the manager, but the injuries have been tough, and a lot of the young players clearly have played a lot of football this season, which includes European football, and I think they've simply struggled to cope with those demands. That happens from time to time, and we've seen, for example, teams overcome that sort of struggle in years past. I think Arsenal is a good example of that, a team that still is sort of getting acclimated to the extremely dense schedule that, for example, Man City have. And that's pretty much all I have in terms of, first of all, Game Week 35 and then Game Week 36 in terms of how I plan to line up my team and what my plans are. So I think this is a very easy road free transfer. Let's talk about how we plan to navigate our moves from Game Weeks 37 38 to close out the season. So starting here with Game Week 37, I wanted to go through my 2 free transfers this week. And the suggested 2 free transfers that I've made for myself provisionally are the 2 as follows. So Pau Torres out to Trippier here, so 1 free transfer being used, and then Flecken out for Onana here, the 2nd free transfer being used. The reason why I'm considering these 2 moves is because, first of all, I think if Trippier comes back, we know that he just has a lot of upside, right? Brighton at home now looks like such a good game. Look at how poor Brighton are on offense right now. Not just even defense, how poor they are there, but yeah, offense, they just don't seem to be bringing anything to the table. It is Newcastle at home, which is really nice. And then even with United, you can argue that, from Trippier's perspective, yes, of course, Newcastle are a terrible sort of away team, and defensively, they've been shocking. But I still think that United have also been equally poor on defense. So when you look at Trippier as an option, I like him, as an attacker for this game week, for someone to just target here as a transfer. So I kind of like my 2 free transfers here. Part of the reason why I'm doing this, of course, is that Pau Torres, of course, just has a simply bad fixture on game week 37 here. Flecken as well has a bad fixture too. He's away from home, so I've got the chance here to go to Onana, who hopefully can make a lot of saves at home versus Arsenal and Newcastle. It doesn't feel like the greatest upside chasing moves, but I also have to be completely honest in saying, for example, do I back Brighton's doubles more? Not really. Do I back Newcastle's doubles more? Not really, in the sense that I'd rather go for Trippier, right, over Onana. So I think Onana is the best case scenario. I would already have Guardiola within my team, so I'm tripled up on Man City. The only team here that I suppose I can consider as well is, a team like Tottenham, for example. So let's say one of the best picks that I think for Game Week 37 is going to be Pedro Porro, particularly if Trippier is not fit. So if, let's say, we find out that, Trippier, for example, is not fit and available to play, I think that I'll simply just go for Pedro Porro instead in this situation, and then consider going for Pedro Porro. And then maybe if we find out about news regarding, let's say, either Dubravka or Pope, I can go towards, instead a Dubravka plus Pedro Porro sort of pairing. Right now, of course, as I said, I don't have information on Trippier. It's very unlikely we're going to get information from Eddie Howe. So we absolutely need to be certain that Trippier plays. And part of that, I think, is Trippier ultimately has been injured and sidelined for a long time. So the ability for him to maybe play two fixtures in a row, a lot of minutes, that could be overall quite concerning. So I kind of like the idea of Pedro Porro being a really good sort of backup option, and then finding out the information about hopefully whether Pope is back for Game Week 37. I can then make that final move to get my triple Newcastle here, and then just go for Dubravka and Pedro Porro as well. So that would be my alternative sort of moves. In terms of even crazier moves, I think previously what I was thinking is that maybe I could go for something like removing Saka from my team and going for Richarlison. But I still think even with the Richarlison injury, you have to say that there's still a lot of players within this Tottenham team that can take and share minutes between each other. Yes, of course, it might feel good to get the upside of Richarlison versus, his opponent here in Game Week 37, which would be Burnley at home, Man City at home, and therefore, I can triple up on Spurs like that. But I still think, casting my mind towards Game Week 38, Saka's got Everton at home. That's probably going to be a good game, to close the season out. If anything, yes, of course, Everton have been an amazing defensive team, but that's mostly also been at home at Goodison Park. So I think here I've got a situation and a scenario where I can just simply go for Saka and keep him within my team. I think he's a big differential versus a lot of people who have recently wildcarded. And I think a lot of people are also considering going back into Saka, which is very interesting, right? So a lot of people holding that, for example, Bruno Fernandes spot within FPL have unfortunately, missed the boat on the Sheffield United fixture. They did get, of course, the Burnley at home game where I would say Burnley, look, he was super unfortunate to get more than the bonus points he got. He got 4 points in that game, created a lot of chances, which has happened from time again. I've owned Bruno for quite a lot this season, and I've been laughed at for it. But I think, Bruno is still an amazing pick. I'm not going to own Bruno. I think I'm going to miss out on the chance to get Bruno. But I still like, for example, double Arsenal defense here. And I probably wouldn't take a hit for maybe 2 defenders unless I'm absolutely certain that if, let's say, there's a miraculous situation where, let's say, I find out that Trippier is fine, I suppose what I could do still is I can go Onana as an option, or I can just restore Onana as an option here, and I can go out of Saliba, potentially to also, pick up Trippier within my team here too. That could be an option. Here it says Trippier is blocked, but of course you can understand that I can go Trippier. Just a little bit of a kink in terms of the transfer planner, because it originally thinks that I went for Trippier as an option. But as I said, the hits that I have to be taken, I have to be absolutely sure that these players will return on this game week and give me that additional upside. So for example, when I did my hits on Gameweek 35 this week with a minus 16, a lot of those hits are, the idea that I can recoup some of the value this week, but also that I can recoup the value later on Gameweek 37. Here in this week, I think the tough thing with taking a hit on Gameweek 37 is you have to be absolutely, certain, or hopefully, as close to certain as possible in knowing that you can recoup the hit, within this game week alone. So that is something very tough to think about. What's nice, of course, about this game week compared to, let's say, Game Week 35 is that for the doubles, I would say Chelsea and Tottenham have very tough doubles in Game Week 35, but appearance points are something that always softens the blows of hits. Whereas here, of course, I think everyone's fixtures are slightly better, right? If you look at Tottenham's fixtures, you've at least got a Burnley at home fixture, which looks incredible for Pedro Porro. When you're looking and casting your eyes towards, for example, Chelsea, Nottingham Forest, and Brighton still seem like teams that they can do absolutely well in, particularly also from a defensive point of view, right? Not having to play versus Aston Villa, not having to play versus Tottenham, that's nicer for Chelsea. So I think people who own Petrovic and Gusto would be a lot happier there. I would also have to manage Gusto as well. For example, if Gusto is out, that completely justifies the hit. If he's still out to close off the end of the season, or even if, let's say, Reece James makes a miraculous comeback and sort of takes his spot away from the team. But that's something to think about, right? So Trippier, Porro are definitely on my mind. In terms of goalkeepers, I think it's Onana and the Newcastle goalkeeper that are only on my mind. Unfortunately, I can't go for Chelsea unless I move my way out of Gusto, but hopefully he's going to be fit. So that's the general consensus here. And then in terms of Game Week 38, because we only will have one transfer then, I think the tough situation with Game Week 38 is that you have to look at one of these fixtures as this is one of those game weeks in FPL where, unfortunately, fortune favors the people who are on the deadline, who are waiting for leaks. So the same way, for example, we got the Salah is leaked news for Liverpool on Game Week 35. I think Game Week 38 is crucial because Liverpool will play their final season and final game with Klopp in Game Week 38. It's very probable that those leaks will be very instrumental, right? What if Man City win the league on Game Week 37? That would completely change the landscape for Game Week 38. Now, of course, if Arsenal and City continue to win every single fixture, Game Week 38 is going to be crucial. Both teams are going to be featuring all their best players. So I like the idea that I'm heading towards Game Week 38 with basically 6 players between Arsenal and City. With Isak, you never know what's going to happen, right? Maybe there's a world where Newcastle will think about, sending Callum Wilson off. Maybe he starts ahead of Isak. As far as Chelsea, of course, I still think because they've been so good this season with Palmer and Jackson, I think their minutes are safe. With Son, his minutes are safe as well. Hopefully, of course, Tottenham would also be fighting to sort of keep a European spot. Maybe Aston Villa would also leave a bit of room within the sort of title race there. And maybe I can think about also playing Pedro Porro versus Sheffield United away from home. These are the kind of things that I'm thinking about right now in terms of Game Week 38. But I think because I've created such a strong team in terms of depth for Game Week 37, ultimately there shouldn't be too many transfers I have to make on Game Week 38 unless there's something miraculous like multiple benchings. Like, for example, if Haaland is benched and I want to go for Salah for one last final game week in FPL to close out, his time in FPL, if this is really his last season, of course, which we don't even know, maybe a hit will have to be done in Game Week 38. But I think for now, as long as you continue to build a strong team for Game Week 37. Keep an open eye to, of course, what the title race is, who, for example, is still fighting for European spots in terms of, let's say, your Aston Villas and even Spurs. That's very interesting because I think last season too, if you guys remember, Aston Villa were also sort of fighting for European spots with Brighton, and they absolutely, I think, destroyed Brighton, if I recall. Partially because, of course, they went full strength and it was a very important fixture for them. So these are the kind of things that probably make the difference in Game Week 38, where, clearly some teams are going to be on the beach, quote unquote. So it's nice, of course, that I have teams and players that probably will have something to play for, something to care about. Maybe not Chelsea, but we'll see. Of course, they can still easily get within European spots themselves. So that's basically the landscape and my discussion here for Game Week 38. Let me know what your thoughts are in terms of Porro and Trippier and even the goalkeepers as well. When we're talking about Newcastle goalkeepers versus, let's say, the Man United goalkeepers, because I think it's something to think about as well. And of course, we have to just stay tuned towards Gusto's fitness in terms of my own FPL team. For you guys who've wildcarded recently, I think you don't have too many tough decisions to make. You can consider, slightly more aggressive moves compared to myself, because clearly I'm still one free transfer down. I think even if I go back to, for example, my Game Week 36 team, ultimately I have Pau Torres in there, who has no place, within a wildcard team or a team that is trying to close the season out, because he's just got single game week fixtures. He doesn't have a good double, and Aston Villa's fixtures are tough, I think, from a clean sheet perspective. So those are my thoughts, and I hope you guys have a wonderful week ahead. Take care, goodbye, and I'll see you guys soon.